Good evening, everyone. This is the 66th episode of Talatoks. No? And with me now na maaga no, is Luan of
Hello.
Astrology.
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Oo, good evening. Oo. Maganda yung topic natin ngayon. Medyo madami, no? We'll try to cover as much as possible. Pero actually
As much as
related
we
tong
can.
Oo, related 'tong lahat na 'to 'no. Unang-una siyempre in the news 'no is the coronation of the King of
Ah,
Britain ano, the Great Britain ano, si King Charles
King
III 'no.
Charles. Hindi
'No.
pa ako sanay na King Charles, 'no? Parang
Oo nga,
Prince
eh.
Charles na.
Parang prince pa rin ang tawag natin. Oo, oo. Some of you might be
King
wondering 'no,
Charles.
'di ba ang mga dini-discuss natin dito generally about the Philippines 'no. Pero the reason why we pick this topic 'no is aside from being in the news 'no recently is that nasa history ng astrology kasi 'no itong connection ano between the royals 'no, especially sa England ano. So we'll try to touch on that a bit 'no, specifically itong coronation ano ni King Charles no? For example ano, may question that we would want to answer no? Especially with the help no of our friend from Australia si Mari Garcia. Hello Mari.
Hi,
Good
Mary.
evening.
Good evening to you, Mary.
Kumusta everybody?
All good,
We're
all
we're
good.
good. We're good because
Yeah.
so we're going to discuss tonight the chart of the coronation of
Mm,
King Charles no, the third no.
mhm,
And then siguro it's a good thing then to look back no on the chart of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth no the
mhm.
first no
Yeah.
because it has been recorded and perhaps admitted no by the royal family that the coronation of Queen Elizabeth the first no was actually computed no or timed
Mm,
no by the great astrologer John Dee.
Sandy.
yeah, that's right.
Mhm. Mm. And the question now is, no, did King Charles or whoever in the royal family, employ an astrologer to time this recent event, no? Let's explore that later.
Mhm.
Okay. If I understand it right, no, Australia is still part of the Commonwealth, no, of Great Britain. Is that
Yes,
right,
that's
Mary?
correct. That's correct. Yeah,
Mhm.
Oh,
yeah. So we have like the head of state is the king or the monarch of of Great Britain, but then they're represented in Australia by a governor general.
Mhm.
mm.
But we elect a parliament and a prime minister and whatever.
Okay.
So it's yeah, and
A mix.
usually yeah, it's mixed, but the crown or the sovereign has no political power,
Mhm.
and it's really ceremonial, and and legalities are very few.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's more of
Moral.
titular, no? Is that right?
yeah, titular and also like trade based.
Mm.
Mhm.
So countries like Malay, I think Malaysia is still part of the Commonwealth, but New Zealand, the Solomon Islands, the
Canada.
Canada, the Caribbean, South Africa, etc. They're all part of the. I think there's about, I forget now how many countries, 70 or 80 countries.
80. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's still part of the Commonwealth, no?
Yeah,
Okay.
some of them are still based on the Westminster system, like they have a parliament and whatever. Some are republics,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
and yeah, so republics have presidents, but some of them still belong to the Commonwealth.
Mhm.
Like Kenya, for example, is a republic, and so South Africa, but they are still part of the Commonwealth, even though they don't have the British monarch as their head of state.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay. So,
yeah. So anyway, so it's all that kind of links.
uh, yeah, yeah. How does it feel to have a new king?
Well, it's
Yes.
interesting because my mom,
Mhm.
because even when we lived in the Philippines, my mom had a very soft spot for the Queen
Mhm.
because she and the Queen shared a birthday,
Oh,
Oh,
right.
and
That's
they were
nice.
born
Yeah.
only 1 year apart.
Mhm.
So
mm.
my mom had this kind of connection, even though she knew nothing. Yeah, it was like in the Philippines, you only hear a little bit like that. But when we came to Australia, it was like she became really kind of, she favored the Queen a lot, and whatever. But I've never known anything different. So it's interesting, but it's also interesting to see how people view the now king when he was the Prince of Wales,
Mm-hmm.
because he's always been quite, not necessarily controversial, but different.
Right.
Because, like, if you think about royal family, blah blah blah, but he has been a great what is it, philanthropist.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
when he was only in his early 20s, he decided to do something different. Like, instead of just being a playboy prince, so he actually established something called the Princess Trust. And it's been going on since, I think, the 70s. And what they
Mm-hmm.
do is they sponsor projects for
Mm-hmm.
people, for individuals, for communities that need help, whether they're
Mm-hmm.
poor or whether they don't have the facilities, whatever. So, and I think when they were talking about figures, it has helped something like 8 million people,
Oh, wow.
like not just in the UK, but in different places as well. So, for example, somebody's got a project, say in Malawi or in Kenya or even in New Zealand, and they say, we want to establish this thing to help, for example, these kids who will not have any opportunity at all because, you know, because of family situations or whatever. And so they'll get like a fund, but they themselves have to then develop ways of earning the money. And the king, who was then the prince, would then help by actually lobbying businesses. So he would
Mm-hmm.
use his position
Mm-hmm.
to actually, maybe write to businesses in that area or in that country to say, I'm the sponsor or whatever, help, whatever. So, and I think it's amazing, because I think the Princess Trust is now worth something like 1 billion
Mm-hmm.
UK pounds.
Mhm, mhm. And I also read somewhere, that
Mm.
even before the whole world is talking about climate change, he was already at the
Oh,
forefront of that
ab-
movement.
absolutely. Because I remember reading about it. It would have been in the late 70s, and he gave a speech where he talked about how important it was to look after the earth, because he
Mhm,
said, we've only got one earth. Why are we destroying it? And of course, big business got really angry, and they
mhm,
lobbied the English government to say, because there's the real strong thing that the royal family cannot meddle in politics at all. That's a real kind of no.
mhm,
And these investors or big businesses were saying to the British government, he's playing politics. And they're saying,
Mhm.
and he's saying, no, I'm not. He said, I'm just talking about the things that we have to look after. And he has an estate called Highgrove. And when he bought it, it was like nothing. And what he did there is he developed like organic farming,
mhm,
and like he also used it as a way of developing like the old skills that had died, because people did take them up because they were old, like making certain things. And so he encouraged the locals to develop these old trades, old skills. He
mhm,
also made it into a refuge for, what is it, extinct plants or animals
mhm.
in
Okay.
the UK anyway. So he has a very high reputation about that. And like anything that in a state, anything that is consumed, it stays there. So if they grow the food, if there's any waste, it goes back into the ground to grow more food. So he's been like that. I mean, Highgrove is now, I think, 30 years old. So and things like he's rescued species of like lettuces or old roses, etc., that were no longer fell out of favor. So no, so garden centers wouldn't grow them, or florists, but he
Mhm.
developed them, and he created a new market for them. Yeah.
Interesting, interesting. No, so
Yeah.
Right.
probably we can check his natal chart later on,
Sure.
and
Sure.
see how
Mm,
where in the chart these are reflected,
mm,
specifically about his humanitarian
mm,
activities.
mm.
Okay. Uh,
I've got his chart. If you wanted to, Resty, I can share it with you if you when you want it.
yeah, sure. No,
Okay.
let's welcome first si Mel. Hello,
Hi,
Hello, good
Mel.
Mel.
evening. Welcome
Good
back again.
evening.
Good evening po.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Ma'am Marie. Good evening. Hi, Ma'am
Hello,
Luan. Hi,
Jamal. How
Sir
are you?
Ricky.
Hi, Spell.
Um,
Good evening.
healing.
You got sick, Mel.
Yes, sir. Nagkasakit po
Uh,
ako. I got sick.
okay. I hope.
A day after my birthday. And then, nahit rin ako na eclipse.
Oo, oo.
Saka ko na ikukwento sa inyo, pero
Madalas na.
grabe, grabe ang nangyaring eclipse na nangyari
Ah,
talaga. Sa
y-
lunar lunar eclipse na yun.
Uh, actually the eclipse is one of the things that we want to discuss because astrologically speaking we don't normally want to hold anything important during eclipses but maybe let's check and also with Mari how important are eclipses for the royals
Mhm.
for us I would by checking reading the text from medieval astrologers etc. The eclipses are generally not advisable for these activities, but as we have seen in history it seems that the royals are very fond of the
Mm,
eclipses.
mm,
Okay, yeah, well,
mm,
that's exactly nga what we are
mm,
trying to discuss tonight. Let's say in the case of King Charles, the signs that Jamal mentioned are
mm,
actually in the chart of
mm, mm,
King Charles. His sun sign is his sun sign is Scorpio, his moon sign is
Or
Taurus, and these were hit by the
mm.
recent eclipse.
okay.
Let's go back to Prince or King na nga pala,
King Charles. Yeah,
King Charles,
nalilito pa din ako eh. King
uh,
Charles. King
Mhm.
Charles.
so
Uh,
as we mentioned nga, his sun sign is Scorpio, and his moon sign
okay.
is Taurus, So eksakto ito yung these are the placements of the recent eclipse, So that
Mhm.
made us wonder nga, was the coronation timed astrologically? Did they study it? Did even the time, although I think the time is more of traditional, because even in
Mm.
the Philippines, in America, it's almost always around noon time, because
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
It,
Mhm.
Even if we go back to in English history, the coronation of the first English king, well, the United English King, was in
11th century.
1066,
Mhm.
and he was crowned at midday on Christmas Day, and that was
Oh,
William the Conqueror. So there's a bit of a tradition for, like, and I think it's also symbolic because the king is the sun, and if you put the sun in the 10th house, then you have that sense of power and
oh.
glory and influence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's always a strong election when you have the sun on top, as I've the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
more so for this event, which is a coronation. So very, very exciting times ahead.
Mm.
Um,
Okay, sige,
okay,
let's
so do you
continue.
wanna
Yeah.
flash charts of King Charles? I have it here also. Do you guys want to take a look at it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, I'll start sharing here. Here we are. So can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Do you have the same data, Marin?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's so it's the Scorpio Sun at 22, 5 Leo rising, and the Moon at 0 Taurus. in the
It's quite
10th.
easy to
Yeah.
look at the kings because they actually really document the time. They announce
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's an interesting chart, just quickly, because his moon is his mother's son,
Yes,
and yeah, there's lots of family connections with the chart.
right. It really does.
Mm,
And it's such a good symbol when you mentioned about him being conscious of the earth and him being
mm,
very focused on gardening and soil and
mm,
organic things. And he
mhm,
has like, a lot of placements in the fourth house with the
mhm,
in Taurus. So that's something
mm.
very telling.
I think also his sense of wanting things to be perfect or having an ideal, etc., with that Venus Neptune conjunct the IC, that sense of a perfect world or a perfect earth or a perfect home,
Yeah,
or you know
right.
mm,
Right. That's right. Right. So right, that's very true too. And there's a lot to be seen in the chart. It's just a lot of information jumping up. Yeah. And then the moon being on the 10th house also with
mm,
the North Node also.
yeah.
Something about the mother being very influential.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
She's even if she wasn't queen, she was a major figure in his life, you know.
For sure.
Domineering,
And he was
sorry,
also
dominant.
very, right, very dominant. And he was
Mm,
also a little bit introverted in a way when he was younger. Was that right? I remember reading
mm.
things about him not necessarily being very much he was like softer. That's the
Yes, yes,
right,
yeah.
softer and then more introverted.
Mm,
And to see the sun in the fourth house, and that says a lot too. And
mm,
then wounding
mm,
by the father, conjunct Chiron. He
mm,
had a lot of struggle with his dad and
yeah.
how, right.
Mm. And the other thing too is that his grandmother played a very important role in his life, Queen Elizabeth's mother. And her son in Leo is conjunct his ascendant,
Mm.
Oh,
you know, and she was a very dominant, not very important figure in his life, because when he was young and the queen became queen, he was only like about 5, and so she used to go away for like royal tours and stuff, and so he stayed with his grandmother. she
mhm,
she played a very important role in his early life.
Uh, how can we see the godmother in the chart? That's one
The
question.
grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
um I don't know. I mean, some people talk about, like, if you look at Neptune, maybe that's the grandmother, the older woman, etc. You could also talk about the fact that you could look for mother's mother, that go
right.
from the 10th, the fourth, no, the 10th from the 10th, and that would be here. But I just kind of looked at the fact that I
The
know that
sun. The sun.
that well, not just the son, but the son,
So,
his grandmother's son is on his ascendant.
okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
okay.
But
Mhm,
yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. No.
Mm, mm,
Okay, so basically, yeah, no. So Neptune, if you will follow that rule, no,
mm-hmm,
Neptune is in the third house, no, and
mm-hmm,
Venus is there,
mm-hmm,
which I think is one of his most important planets, no, because the
mm-hmm,
10th
mm-hmm,
house is ruled by Venus, no, so
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
definitely, maybe in terms of Neptune, let's say enchantment, no, with
Yep.
the with the, with the kingdom, or no, or
Mm.
leaving this
What's really interesting too is that his grandmother was the one responsible for him marrying Diana in the first place,
right.
Mhm.
Read that.
because Diana's godmother was the writer Barbara Cartland,
Mhm.
and she was a good friend of the Queen Mother, and they
Mm,
got together and said, I think they would look good together, so they engineered it a bit,
mm.
because they thought it was a good match. So there you go. the influence of grandmother with his eventual partner, or wife. So yeah.
That's interesting.
Hmm.
Very
Okay.
interesting.
Okay. And okay, no. So with regards to the coronation itself, no. One thing very striking is that this similar no configuration,
Mm, mm, mm,
was highlighted, no,
mm.
in the coronation, no. The sun is on the 10th. I think, no. The sun is on the 10th
Yeah,
house, no.
yeah, yeah.
Sun in Taurus, no.
Mm-hmm.
So that would put
Do you have the coronation chart, Luan?
I'm Googling now. The
I've got
exact
I've got it
have
if you
it.
want me to share it.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
sure.
Okay. Um, I'll just hang on. Do I need to share? I don't know if I can share my screen without
I'll stop
permission.
sharing it. Sure.
Uh,
Okay.
yes, you can.
Yeah. I'll just open the coronation chart, and this is based obviously on the Can you see that?
Yes, very
Yes.
clearly.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it's ascendant, no, Leo
Yeah.
also.
Yeah. And there's his ascendant, 5 Leo, or six Leo in the coronation, but 5 Leo is his natal, is Charles' ascendant,
Wow.
and
Uh-huh.
that's his north node. So he was having a nodal return for this
Mhm.
coronation, because the nodal returns are 1938, 57, and of course 76. So 75, 76,
Mhm.
approximately. So yeah. Um, so you can see the the connections to, and the moon of the coronation is his sun, because his sun is at 22 Scorpio, and the moon of the coronation is 24 Scorpio.
Right, right.
Do you want me to put it together so you can see it like a
Yeah, sure.
bi-wheel?
Sinistring, yeah.
Sure, that would be
Mm.
nice too.
Yeah. Okay. Hang on a minute, and I'll
And
just
also,
stop the share and put it together. Yeah.
so a 15-degree Taurus sun would be directly opposite the eclipse last May
Yeah.
6th, right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll
Inverted
put
eclipse.
his chart in the middle, and I'll put the coronation one on the outside.
Mhm.
And then you can.
Oh, there you go.
So
Wow. This has to be timed somehow. I don't know.
yeah, I
Look
look.
look
I
at
don't
that.
think they'll ever admit it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Saturn opposition.
mm,
Exact 0.5
exactly.
degrees.
Yep, yep. That's right. That's right. So he was at his one, two. This is his fourth Saturn opposition.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the coronation.
Mhm.
More on opposition, more challenges.
Yeah,
Parang
yeah.
there is a seesaw of energies.
Mm,
Saturn
mm,
in Pisces, Saturn in Virgo,
mm,
then Sun in Scorpio, Moon in Scorpio, Sun in Taurus, Moon in Taurus.
mm.
Seesaw of energies.
Yeah.
There's an opposing.
When you look back at his life, at the times when Saturn came into opposition in his life, so he was like 14, about 35, and then in his mid 50s or whatever. This is the third Saturn opposition, and he's always battling. He's always kind of like trying to make himself um uh battle the establishment, or to do something different, and like it's always about and it's because second and eighth axis, there's money involved in this,
Mhm.
and that he has to deal with things changing for him. So it's really interesting. I did write an article about this. It's on my website if you want to read it. The time is a little bit out because I forgot to factor for British Standard Time, but summertime. But it
What's
talks
the
about
name of your website again?
just Mari Astrologer.
Okay.
And if you want, I'll put the link on the thing. But I just talk about the connection of the coronation chart with his chart, and what you were saying, Jama, about that Saturn opposition. that there's a pattern in his life, that there are always the challenges that he brings. And because Saturn rules that sixth and seventh houses, it's always about other people and about his duty and his responsibility. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of Saturn,
Mm,
so it seems that Saturn is very important in his life.
mm,
Because of this, Saturn is actually trining his moon sign, and
mm,
okay, and aspecting several other planets, no, including his Mercury. Yeah,
The
Mercury.
roots
mm. The
descendant.
Mercury especially,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it's quite tight, I think. Yeah, yeah. Because the
Yeah.
Mercury's down here.
Yes.
Mm,
So it's so as you were saying, no, the influence of Saturn, might been very
mm,
significant, no,
mm,
in his development, no, as a person or
mm,
as a king, no, in this
mm,
case, no.
mm. Well, he's the oldest person to be crowned king in
Yeah.
history.
Okay, that's
And
Saturnian. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely. And that he's crowned at the Saturn opposition. That says
Mhm.
something, doesn't it?
Yeah. These are things that you cannot make up.
Mm. And you could not time it. Like if you made a story about it, nobody would believe it. They'd say,
Uh-huh.
you made that up. But there it is. It's all, as they say, written in the stars.
Uh-huh. One thing that I remember, no, Robert Hand mentioned that
Mm-hmm,
speaking about fate, no,
mm-hmm,
one of his statements is that no, you cannot change, no, the date of your Saturn return, or in this
no.
case, no, Saturn opposition,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
because it's fated.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, you can change some things. For example, no, you
Mm-hmm,
choose to get married on this specific date,
mm-hmm,
but no, the movement of the planets are regular, somewhat no, regular,
mm-hmm,
predictable, no. And
mm-hmm,
if you believe in astrological theory, it means that this is part of his fate, no, to be
mm.
crowned on this during this period, no.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm,
And you can, people kind of go, oh, but it's such a coincidence. It's not,
not.
like they would have planned, this coronation, years ago, and they always would have planned it between May and June because that's the summertime. You have
Yeah, this
greater
one.
daylight hours and all that sort of stuff. The only monarch I could find that wasn't crowned in this period was Edward the Seventh, because he got appendicitis. They had to postpone the coronation because he had to have an operation.
mm.
And he had to recover. Yeah, so it's pretty much that kind of tradition.
So I guess if we line it up, he had the eclipse happen
Mm-hmm,
on his sun. He had
mm-hmm,
the exact nodal return happening also around the
mm-hmm,
time. Had an
mm-hmm,
exact Saturn opposition happening.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Time. Had
mm-hmm.
a Jupiter transit to his 10th in Placidus, but then just very very soon it will be entering his 10th whole sign house, and it's
Yep.
just all up, no, very
Absolutely.
unexpected.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember because his mother died on the 6th of September, and I can't
Mhm.
remember where Jupiter was then. Um, whether it was already in Aries or it was still in Pisces. But some research that I did, this is many years ago, and just looked at um, the charts of people that have been crowned monarchs in the UK, and they came to the throne, whether it was by death or by accident, like his grandfather came to the throne because his younger brother abdicated. They had a Jupiter transit to the MC or to the Sun or to the ascendant.
Oh,
That
interesting.
was really interesting, really interesting, because this family has a big statement in fixed signs, especially, believe it or not, in the signs of Leo.
Mm.
Yeah, so yeah. So if they don't have Leo signs, they bring in people that have Leo signs in their life.
Very interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Mm.
Another interesting, no, about this coronation, like, is that according to Sharon Knight, no,
Mm.
even the ingress, Oh,
Yep. The Aries
March.
ingress. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
It also has the Leo ascendant sign,
yep. Yep.
Mhm.
That's right. That's right.
computed for London, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think, astrology speaks so clearly if we listen. No?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But one thing perhaps that we want to answer today is that why is it that they have chosen the eclipse period? No?
Mm, mm,
Uh,
mm.
it seems that actually even in the medieval times, no, Mercury retrograde is not that popular. So I think we can ignore the question of Mercury retrograde. No, so
Mm, mm.
monarchs don't care about Mercury
No,
retrograde.
no,
But
no.
how
And
about the eclipse? How about the eclipse?
I think it's interesting because it is the last eclipse in the Taurus Scorpio family
Mm-hmm.
because the nodal axis moves into Aries in a minute. So, you know, it's interesting that they take that you go from Venus ruled north node to a Mars ruled north node. So perhaps,
Preferable.
yeah, putting that Venus in there because the eclipse will last for 6 months, that effects of the eclipse. So you're kind of hoping that you have a benefic kind of
Mm-hmm.
flavor, that's just my thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it's actually an interesting eclipse because it's very intense emotionally. Like I think you were talking about JML, because it's that the family seven north. It's all about intense emotions and passions and people getting carried away with things. And I suppose the
Mhm.
coronation is on one level, you had people going like, the thousands of people that crowded the streets just to, some people got there last week to get their little spot.
Mm-hmm. Even the Philippines
Mm,
president.
mhm. Yeah.
uh,
I did see someone in the audience wearing a terno. So
uh,
I don't know how she was, whether she was an embassy person or
yeah. And
one of the ministers.
there were our other two Filipinos no, that were invited.
Mhm, mm,
Mhm.
mm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Of course, no, the other world leaders. No? So
yeah.
basically, that's well, in terms with regards to the electional chart,
Mm,
Leo indicates
mm,
an event that is seen by more people,
mm, mm.
grand celebration, and of
And think
course,
about the gold.
yeah, gold, the
And
the
the,
the,
the
the courage, and
mm,
is it
mm.
his cape, no, is that made of gold?
Yes, it was. It was the tunic that he wore when he was
Hmm.
crowned, has gold thread in it, and then of course the carriage. Did you see the carriage?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the carriage. But if you notice, the crowns were not gold.
Okay. O-
Mm.
You know,
Uh, yeah.
I think they were silver or maybe white gold, but they were not like yellow gold.
Is that the
Um,
traditional or?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just thinking because you uh, they wore their state crowns. They only come out for coronations and very, very, very rarely. So I don't know how, because I don't think the the crowns are that old. Like the crown that Camilla wore was a crown that was made for one of the queen consorts back
Mm.
in the early 1900s, 1911 or something like that. And his crown, I think, only goes back maybe 200 years, so it's not old. So
Mm.
I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But one of the thing that I found so interesting when you look at the coronation chart, you know how they had the different items like the sword and the orb and the scepter and the ring and whatever. You can look at it all astrologically in the coronation chart. In how it symbolizes. Like they talk about the orb as being about the world, about being yeah, the world, and then the scepter being like the 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 rule of law, like you could talk about
Mm.
Saturn in that one, and things like that. So that's really interesting.
Very, very interesting.
Hmm.
Another argument, no, that we can
Yeah.
say that
Mm,
it was actually astrologically timed, no, is
mm,
as I read some rules of
mm,
election astrology, no, written
mhm,
by Sal Iban Bisher. Is
mhm,
that the right
mhm.
pronunciation?
Yeah, yeah. I don't
Uh,
know. Yeah, that's the way I
okay.
would pronounce it.
Yeah, okay, no. What's interesting is that the first there were several rules, no, but the first two set of rules, no, were actually followed, no, by this coronation. The first
Mm,
one is that the rising sign should be a fixed sign, no, because
mhm.
they want
Ability.
the
Yes,
kingdom, no, oh
absolutely.
yeah, stability
Stability.
in the kingdom, and they want it to last, no.
Mm,
Okay, and then number two is that the sun must be at the top of the chart, no, 10th
mhm,
house or
mhm.
NC, no.
Yep.
Of course, it was followed. And
Mm,
another thing, no,
mm,
Sal Iban Bisher
mhm.
actually stated these two signs. No? The ascendant is Leo and the sun sign is Taurus. No? But
Yeah, yeah.
it was
You could.
followed to the T.
Mm, mm.
Mhm,
You
mhm.
you cannot make this up, can you? And
Yeah.
then you have and then
You
you have
have to be
you have the
timed.
yeah, and you have the king that's being crowned that has a moon in Taurus and the sun in Scorpio,
And
and a Leo
ascendant
ascendant.
Leo.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
you would ask yourself, is the kingdom in good hands? Is the
Mm,
kingdom in a stable hands? So
Mhm,
you would
mhm.
say yes, yeah.
very
Mm.
thick.
Because there is a connection,
Yeah,
between
yeah,
these two
absolutely.
charts. Mhm, mhm,
You were talking about eclipses, Resty.
mhm,
Talking about eclipses. William, the Prince of
Mhm.
Wales now,
mhm,
he is born on an
Or
eclipse.
non-tips, yes.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And the marriage.
sorry?
And the marriage of
Yeah, yeah,
Prince
Also Diana.
yeah,
Princess
yeah, yeah,
Diana.
yeah.
Mhm,
That
mhm,
was, I think, an eclipse one too.
yeah.
Mm.
I remember reading from somewhere that Diana really had a lot of eclipses marked milestones in her life.
Mm-hmm,
The birth of a son, the marriage, the divorce,
mm-hmm,
always
mm.
within the time frame
The
of an
time frame. Yeah. But she was very lunar in that way.
uh-huh. That's
And
true.
yet, and because she had that Cancer sun, but she had an Aquarian moon, you know?
So
So very
anti
interesting.
Very
Yeah.
anti
Yeah, yeah.
monarchy, in that sense.
Very much, very much.
Of course, not consciously perhaps, but the
No.
trajectory of her life,
Mm,
ended up,
mm,
that way. Which I think is another question that popped into my mind is that with this Scorpio, Leo, Taurus influence, how would this concept, of a monarchy,
mm,
fare, in this period, wherein Aquarius is highlighted,
mm, mm,
we are now in sort of, the era of Aquarius or era of air,
mm, mm,
so which is diametrically opposed, to the concept of monarchy, or in
mm.
this case, symbolized by the sign, the zodiac sign Leo.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
it is the Aquarius is the antithesis of Leo because it's opposite, isn't it?
Yes,
That's very
yes.
Yeah.
true.
And you have Saturn ruled versus Sun ruled, you know? So
Mhm.
suddenly you go from, going to have only one individual to having like an institution like
Mm,
Saturn. Be interesting to see. I mean, um, you would like to think because I mean the man is what, 75. He turned 75 this
Mhm.
year. I mean, you would give him maybe 10 or 15 years at the most.
At the most.
At the most. So this
Mhm.
is not this is not certainly a long-lived monarch. I mean, his mother lived till she was in her 90s, but he comes to the throne at 75.
Mhm.
um at the age of 75, not many people are going to take on board the role that he is. At 75, you want to put your feet up.
mhm.
So
Mhm.
it will be interesting to see.
How that
Um,
unfolds. That's true. Right.
maybe
Mm.
that's what the eclipse, might be pointing at,
It
no?
could it could certainly do that. And given that this eclipse is the last eclipse in the sign before it changes sign, because that'll move into Aries next month, I think, the end of June, July. So it's almost like he's the last of an era, maybe.
Ending of an era, no?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
Mm.
mhm. So it's interesting to watch,
Mm.
what will be happening, to the
Yeah, yeah.
royals, no?
Well, I think we are witnesses to history, are we not?
Yeah,
You
this
know.
is a new period,
Yeah.
no?
Mm, mm,
Everything
mm,
is changing, no?
mm, mm.
Exactly.
And how will influence also other people? You know, how they influence not just with the relations with the UK, but like you know, he represents all these people in the Commonwealth, and like they used they have like a meeting. I think it's every 4 years. They all get together, all the heads of state in the Commonwealth, to work out, like the issues that they have about trade or politics or climate change, whatever. And they become like a voting bloc so that they can actually get things done for themselves. So yeah, and
I, I
sorry.
was actually surprised that when you mentioned that around 80
Yeah,
nations, 70 to
yeah,
80
yeah.
nations, are still connected, no? Maybe
Commonwealth.
symbolically, or in that
Yep,
case, no?
yep,
With
yep,
the
yeah,
United Kingdom.
yeah. And it's really interesting because you have you have like United Kingdom, but England, Wales, and Scotland and Northern Ireland are all member states as well.
Of course. Yes.
You know,
The
so
United
it's like,
Kingdom.
yeah, they're United, but they all have their own parliaments too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um,
So
and
entangled.
hey,
It's
yeah, absolutely, and so they make their own local laws, but they all subscribe to a national thing, and so they then send their own kind of representatives because they all have different kind of agendas too. Like Scotland, for example, was on the brink of
separating
voting
too.
for independence. Yeah, absolutely. Because they've always been different, and it's only been the United Kingdom since 1801.
Mm-hmm,
Because
mm-hmm,
before
mm-hmm.
that, they were separate countries. Or there were different kind of associations. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. Very interesting.
And
Very
speaking
interesting.
of
Mm.
endings, no,
Mm-hmm.
another thing to consider actually is this maybe in a few years time, no,
Mm-hmm.
when Pluto, no, will be opposing, no, his
Yep.
natal Pluto placement, no. So
Mm.
basically, that's
Sure.
the end of an era. We can maybe by that time, no, we can really talk about ending of an era.
Mm.
Right.
Well, I think Pluto's going to be in and out of Aquarius for like, I think, till the end of next year into
Mm-hmm.
early 2024, and then it's really into Aquarius.
Mhm.
I think
So,
we'll start to see some of those changes coming in on board, maybe from 2024 onwards.
mhm.
Because he's already streamlined it so much so that, like, the coronation, for example, his mother's coronation had over 8,000 people,
Mhm.
and this one only had like 2,000. So he
Oh.
kind of like really cut it down. And I think the ceremony was cut down to from 4 hours to, I think, 1.5 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And the parade that went around London, that was made cut short, so that you didn't have to spend so much time there. And this there were certain things of the service that they also streamlined, and he chose the music too. He chose all the
Oh, okay.
music for that, because he's a very passionate arts person.
It's very artistic, right? Music and
Yeah,
very
yeah,
yeah. Mhm.
absolutely, absolutely. So he chose a lot of the music and stuff like that. So unlike like his mother's coronation, which was all church oriented and church chosen.
Mhm.
you know.
We can attribute that, no, to his Neptune and
Uh,
Venus
Absolutely. Yeah.
conjunction, no,
Yeah.
in the sign of
Yeah.
Libra. No?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
Absolutely.
idealism too, when he falls in
Mm.
love, he falls in love.
Well, that's
Neptune,
right.
plenty
Yeah.
of ideas. I wanted to point out also that
Mm.
the that Pluto is squaring his moon
Mm.
Right
Yep.
now.
and
Yep. Yep.
changes exact. So
Mm.
that we can
Mm.
see that for the next couple of years until
Yeah.
Pluto really eases into
Yeah.
Aquarius. This would be very big change for him.
It was
Mm.
really interesting because the moon rules the 12th house,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
you know, and the first hit of that Pluto to the moon was in 2020. And
Mm.
Okay, yeah.
that's when
Mother.
his son, when Harry said, bye bye, don't want to be part of this anymore.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
family.
Yeah.
Family concerns.
Family
Right.
and the fact that it was something hidden that became manifest,
Mm.
something that was painful and also pretty intense.
Right, because Harry did a lot of interviews and his book.
Yeah, even
Uh,
before that, like they announced I think they announced it in like the January or February of 2020, like just before the pandemic. They announced that they were going off to live
Leaving.
in USA, and I
Uh-huh.
and of course that was around the time of it's coming up to the Jupiter Saturn conjunction in zero Aquarius.
Right, right.
Mm.
And it was so interesting to just to digress a little bit because
Mm-hmm.
if you look at Harry and Meghan's chart, they had all the signatures of the cardinals, Capricorn
Yep.
rising and
Yep.
Cancer
Mm-hmm.
risings. And such
Yeah.
uh, a good example or exhibit of how the planets could affect.
Yeah.
So
But it's really interesting if you look at Meghan and Catherine, right? The other sister-in-law, the sister-in-law. They they're they're born the same year, about 6 months apart, right?
mhm.
But they both have a Saturn statement in their charts, right? Catherine is a Capricorn sun.
Mm.
They both have Saturn in I think in Libra, yeah. But what's really interesting is that one takes one I suppose expresses Saturn in their lives as the duty and the responsibility, and the other one sees Saturn as the oppressor.
That's a good point.
You know, Megan says, "Oh no, I was made to feel left out, etc., etc." Whereas Catherine's kind of going, "Well, it's my responsibility to be there to support and whatever. So I think that's also interesting.
Very. And
Mm.
yeah, Capricorn shines right through.
Yeah, she's very Saturnian in terms of her demeanor and all that.
Strauss
Mm.
have anything in Capricorn? He doesn't.
No, he doesn't well, you have the Mars in, oh no, that's transiting. In terms of his natal chart, no, there isn't anything in Capricorn. you know Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll stop the
There is
share.
a question. There's a
Mm.
question from the our audience. No, this is from
Mm.
okay, actually nawala na. Pero anyway, his question is how can we see if a person has this divine right no to be a king, no? So if you will rephrase it, no, I
Mm.
think the question is how can we identify or how can we check no if the person is sort of no meant to become a king? That's
I
from
don't.
Dennis pala, by the way.
Yeah.
Mm.
um that's a really hard one because kings are hereditary, aren't they? We
Mm.
don't
Yeah, okay.
vote
Yeah,
for
that's
kings, they're
that's
not
one point.
popular. It's
Uh,
like
uh,
you happen to be born to the right family.
mm. Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
true.
Yeah,
But maybe the question is, of course, no, a king or a royal might have
yeah,
several
yeah,
children. No? So who among
yeah.
them, is meant to be the king?
Well, that's again really interesting because if you look at the queen, she was never meant to be the queen
Mhm.
Mhm. That's
because
true.
it was only an accident that her uncle abdicated, that her father became king, and she became, the but this particular royal family has a habit of that. Like, Elizabeth becomes queen
By default,
because
right?
by default, because her father's the second son, he becomes king. His father was also the second son. He wasn't meant to be king, but his elder brother died. And not only did he become the heir, but he married his brother's fiance,
Mhm.
you know? And well, Edward was always going to be king, but Victoria became queen, not because she was directly in line, but because she was the only surviving legitimate
Right.
child. So it's like, it's a bit of a lottery, isn't it? Even if you're
Uh,
born to the right family.
Yeah, yeah. I
That's
think the
true.
same thing can be said of Queen Elizabeth, no, the
Mm,
first, no.
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
of cou- King Henry VIII, no, was it was written that King Henry VIII was
Mm,
sad or dissatisfied, no, when he
mm.
found out, no, that the his child, no, is a female, no, not a male,
Yeah,
no, because
yeah.
he wants to have
Right.
an heir, no.
An heir, yeah.
Hmm.
It's really interesting because, like, when he finally did have the heir, Edward, he died when he was very young. Like, he was only
Right.
17 or 18,
Uh-uh.
And then that's when Mary, the older sister, becomes the queen, and then she
Hmm.
died, and then Elizabeth becomes the queen.
so,
Yeah.
so no
Uh-huh.
choice for
Again,
them.
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Elizabeth the second's chart too.
Mm.
The chart, if you look at it, I think if I remember correctly, Saturn is conjunct her midheaven.
Yes, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
But her
Right.
sisters is too.
Oh, okay.
Both sisters. So
Oh,
Elizabeth
wow.
Elizabeth's chart has Saturn in Scorpio, conjunct
Mhm.
the midheaven. Her
Right.
sister Margaret, Saturn in Capricorn, conjunct the midheaven. Now, if you said which sister will become queen,
Right.
you'd think you'd pick Margaret, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Right.
because Saturn is
Mm,
dignified, no?
dignified, yeah, that's right. But it's Elizabeth who's the queen. But Margaret's chart is also really interesting, just from a perspective of, it is a chart that, would you like me to share her chart?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
because it's an interesting chart, because it is one of the few charts I have ever seen that is all the just about every planet
Yeah, dignified.
is dignified, and
Oh, wow.
it's really dignified. Let me just put that for you. Here you go.
Okay, while you're checking, no,
Here it
looking for the
is.
chart, no, there is
Yep.
another comment, no, from the
Yep.
audience
Mm-hmm.
from Ruby Lesatin, no.
Mm-hmm.
Those two Filipinos are Pinoy nurses
Mm-hmm.
invited as a nod to all their hard work during the pandemic.
That's right. Yes, I read about that too. Because yeah, they were
Mhm.
working there. So this is Margaret's chart. So you have Saturn in Capricorn,
Wow.
Venus in
Right.
Libra, Mercury in Virgo, Sun in Leo, Moon in Cancer, Jupiter in Cancer. The only one that's not dignified is Mars.
Oh, uh-huh.
You know,
Oh, wow.
But
Uh,
even then, no, Mars has a mutual reception, no, with Mercury.
Right.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
it's supposed to be a very
That's right.
good chart, no?
That's right. And what's really interesting about this is, it's something that myself and a colleague have talked about for years, is that just because a planet is so
Dignified.
essentially dignified, it's supposed to be very good, but it can be very good, but not necessarily very good for the person.
That's true.
You know, like,
Mhm.
if you look at Margaret's Venus in Libra, you'd think she would have perfect relationships. That she would have this wonderful thing, and she was always in search of the perfect relationship, but it was never going to be there. You know, um, because there's the Uranus opposing the Venus. She was never going to have the perfect relationship because she valued her independence too much.
Uh-huh.
You know, and so you think, okay, but there's a Jupiter Venus. There's Jupiter's exalted Venus in rulership. You'd think, wow, two benefics,
Mhm.
both
Right, right.
together, surely she'd have a really good, like a bountiful relationship. She had a lot of relationships, but not necessarily, they weren't necessarily very good for her, or she didn't come out of it very well.
Right. I've read somewhere to Mary about if the planet is domicile, it's a little bit more spoiled, for
Mm,
example. And
mm.
that's something that can happen too, wherein they can just do
Yeah,
what they want and it doesn't really work to their favor in the end, in the long.
exactly. That's exactly the point. That just because a planet is so fortified, it does exactly as it pleases according to its nature, but the
Mhm.
effect is not necessarily good for the person.
Right.
So it's like,
That's
the
interesting.
stories that when you see an angel or when you see God, you're supposed to see God, you're burnt up because it's such a bright light.
Right.
I think it's the same with planets, that they're so perfect that your humanity is consumed by it.
Mhm.
And maybe
Another.
all things are good in moderation,
Yeah,
especially with with
Mm.
dignified planets too, maybe.
that's right. Yeah, well, that's what Plato tells us, isn't it?
Yeah, another
Right.
another point is that
Mm,
all of these dignified planets, no, are actually referring to, no,
mm,
somebody else, no, in their chart, no,
mm,
not
mm, mm,
necessarily
mm.
them. No, for example,
Yeah,
Saturn, dignified Saturn is not really the Princess Margaret. It's
no.
actually her parents, no,
Mother.
Her
or
parents,
mother, no,
the government, her
the government.
sister,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
all said you can't marry the man you love. You
Yeah,
have to
Right.
follow the rules, all that sort
tradition
of
or
stuff.
rules in that
Yeah,
case.
yeah,
Mm, yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. And her mother, her mother, there's mother, and she is absolutely powerful. You know,
Very powerful.
Moon Pluto.
Uh-huh. Wow. This
So
is
yeah,
this is the first time I've seen this chart. It's quite remarkable to look
it
into.
is. It is a remarkable chart, and you can pull away layers of it, and
Right.
it's a chart that keeps giving.
I can see how that could, and
Yeah.
right. Uranus in the ascendant
Mm,
is just very telling
mm,
about how
mm,
she was portrayed, and she was just
mm.
very very out of the norm.
Yeah. Well, she was the Princess Diana of her time.
That's true.
She was the trendsetter. She and the guy she eventually married, what's his name, Armstrong Jones. They were the popular set. He photographed all the leading rock and roll stars of the 60s and 70s, and they were party people.
And if I remember it right, no,
Mm?
the first horoscopes, newspaper horoscopes, were actually made, no, for her.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Because when she was born in 1930. Um, I think I can't remember which British newspaper hired an astrologer to write something about the new princess, and it became so popular that people were writing and saying, "We want tell us something about us,"
Mhm.
and that's how you're quite right, Resty, how that whole idea of
Sun sign
sun sign
columns.
columns came about.
Mm.
Yeah,
Naylor, yeah.
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 Okay.
Very.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So astrology is very much a part, no, of the lives
Yeah.
of royals.
Yeah,
Actually.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I
Okay,
think it's
shall I
such
stop sharing?
a good example too, because since it's all measured their birth times, it's just
Mm,
really
mm.
nice to see that you don't have to rectify. It's something that
N-
was really
No.
recorded and easy to see
Yeah.
the transit, learn from
Mm,
it.
yeah.
Mm.
Well, I'll stop sharing it, but I think for me, one of the things about royal charts is that they're such a good example because not only is the chart usually pretty exact, but also you can follow their life.
Very public, true.
It's so well documented that you can see it happening. Obviously, you're not going to see a lot of the more personal stuff, but at least make a good judgment.
Mhm. I agree.
Mm.
Okay. Going back to the
All right.
question of Dennis, no, regarding divine right, no,
Mm-hmm.
maybe we can discuss a bit, no, some of Plato's notions no on incarnation,
Mm-hmm.
because one thing, no, although the concept of divine right, no, it was only stated clearly, I think, in the 17th or 16th century,
Yeah, yeah.
but it has been practiced also in
Mm.
earlier times, no,
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
religions, cultural settings, no, so it's
Mm.
sort of universal, no, somehow, no,
Mm.
well, at the beginning of civilization.
Absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
the Egyptian kings were supposed to be the incarnation
Divine.
of Ra on Earth, the
Mhm,
sun
Wow.
on
mhm,
Earth. Yeah.
mhm.
So
Okay.
yeah.
And well, according to Plato, no, before we
Mm,
incarnate, no, we were
mm,
given choices, no, what kind of
mm-hmm.
life we will have,
Mm,
no. So I
mm,
think at the top of that ladder is the king or the emperor, no, and below that,
mm.
no, there's a what
A
do you call this,
hierarchy.
hierarchy, no,
Yeah. Mm,
from
mm,
the top,
mm,
no, to the lowest. No? I think the
mm-hmm.
lowest was a dictator, or what do you call that? The term is some an oppressor, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Ano.
Yeah.
So we were given choices, no, before we incarnate. No? That's
Mm-hmm.
according to Plato. No? But it's not really divine right in the in let's say in the political sense, but
Mm, mm.
astrologically speaking, some individuals were meant to be king,
Yeah.
no, in that
Yeah.
case. Mhm. So maybe the question is, what in the chart, no, can we, let's say, at least have an idea that that person is going to be a king, no? Can we do the, actually, I think there there is a method, no, right? No,
Mm.
from the I think it's written somewhere in one of Zoller's work, no, the
Yes.
medieval tools and techniques of the
Yeah.
medieval
Mm.
astrologers. There are rules, no, but it's a bit complex, so we
Yeah.
cannot really.
It's that thing of we talked about must have been maybe last year, I think. We're talking about Dorifori.
Yeah, yeah, Dorifori.
Yeah.
This one of
Yeah,
the
one
rules.
that's one way you can talk about the shall we say, the status that one achieves in life,
Mhm,
whether you
mhm,
are a king or a governor or an ordinary person or whatever. But again, it's like saying, you know, if you want to be king, you have to be born into the family, or somehow get into that family. But it might also be like you could also kind of look at what's the definition of a leader or a monarch, because in our kind of modern society, that's very different to what it was even 100 years ago.
mhm, mhm.
You know,
Yeah. Mhm, yeah.
so I don't know. I don't know.
Do
I don't know
the
what that question
usual
answers.
do the usual suspects apply here? For example,
Mm,
oftentimes rulers would have busy 10th houses or
mm,
busy 11th and 10th. Is it something? I
mhm.
haven't seen enough charts of royals to see, but
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think you'd also like to see a Jupiter that is
right.
Ye-
dignified, or a Saturn. You would want a sun that has some level of elevation, and yet look at Elizabeth II. Her sun is right down in the bottom of the chart. It's in the fourth house, um, and yet, but she has Saturn on the MC. Um,
Queen
um,
Queen Elizabeth the First has Jupiter in the first house.
in the first house, yeah.
Dignified Jupiter.
Mm, mm.
Mhm,
And then who else was and if you look at Queen Victoria, she has a stellium in Gemini in the 12th house.
mhm.
Oh,
you
wow.
know
So it's not
so it's like,
right.
you know um where do we put them, and if we look at what's
That's
a modern,
interesting
yeah,
though.
yeah,
Very interesting
absolutely.
because she wasn't supposed to be queen and she was
Mm,
hidden and they had to figure
mm,
out if she would get the succession and then she
mm,
did get it.
mm. That's right, and she only got it because all her uncles didn't have legitimate children,
Yeah.
you know
And if you think
so
about that too, maybe if you look at timing techniques, there
mm,
planets in the 12th house would have progressed to the first somehow and then put
mm,
her out in the spotlight. That would be
mm.
interesting.
Yep.
Mm.
Yeah, you could look at any and all of those, but I still think, you know uh, at the moment you have William, who's the heir to the throne. How can you then decide whether he will become king, or it will be Harry or one of the children?
Mm.
You know, that's
Okay.
the other question too.
Okay. I think that's another good topic for another
Maybe
Yeah,
be
there's
another
plenty of
session.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah,
mm.
absolutely,
We
absolutely.
can check on that, no? Maybe on the birthday of Prince William, no?
That's July,
July, yeah,
July,
okay.
That's
yeah,
very
yeah.
That's
Oh no, sorry,
another
no,
So
no,
good
when
topic.
sorry, no, I beg your pardon. June 21,
June
22.
21.
Because he's
Oh,
yeah, his son is like zero cancer,
ah,
Yeah.
okay, okay.
Is oh,
Mm.
all right.
Okay na tayo muna sa coronation, ano? I think it's now time for us to being retrograde, ano? I think this is also a good opportunity to look back at what happened, no? In the past
Mm.
election, ano? If we have time, we can check the session or inauguration chart, no, of the current president. It's also interesting.
Mhm.
And let's have a review of whatever, no, what happened, no? For example, to the top contender, no, the former vice president, no,
Mhm.
Leni Robredo and her Angat Buhay Foundation, ano.